So next I'd like to introduce Don Carr and Murray Kopp, who are the co-chairs of Parks for All, to speak to us about an action plan for Canada's parks community.
Thanks, Nadine. While this is loading, I've been texting back and forth with our mighty champion president of the CCIUCN, Meg Beckel. I know, Meg, you can now hear us and see us. She was just watching the slides for a while, but Meg is in Copenhagen and wishes everybody well here, says a big hello. And so I hope all of us, too, maybe on the count of 3, we can say, hi, Meg. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, she'll like that. So we wish you were here, Meg, but thank you for listening in and participating along with us. Okay, so our presentation is now up. I'm very short, and I can tell I can't see many of you over there, but this presentation on Parks for All, it's something that I know Marie and I look very much forward to sharing this with you. Many of you have been involved in this process of the development of Parks for All for the past couple of years. But before we get into it, I'm the executive director of the Canadian Parks Council. So I represent in this role Canada's federal, provincial, and territorial park agencies. And the Canadian Parks Council has been extremely pleased to partner with the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association on this project that really represents communities, local parks, urban parks, regional parks from all across Canada. So Murray wasn't here first thing this morning when we did a go-around of introductions on the floor. So I just welcome Murray to come up and introduce himself and the role that he has in this initiative.
Well, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, everybody, for extending the invitation, and it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. As Dawn indicated, I'm a local government practitioner. I am based out of the Okanagan. I work for the Regional District of Central Okanagan. It's a local government body in British Columbia. But the other role that I play, and the partnership that Dawn mentioned, is that I've been on the board of directors for a number of years, and I act currently as the Parks Chair for the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. So as Dawn indicated, we have thousands of municipalities, all of them who deliver parks and rec services, and many of them very, very engaged in the park sector at a very practical and pragmatic level that Karen mentioned under the Nature for All banner. So Dawn, I'll pass the baton back to you to start us off.
Great. So I just want to underscore the significance of this kind of partnership, because a lot of what we've been talking about this morning is about engaging Canadians and the importance of building a constituency of support right across the nation for the kind of work the people in this room do. We're all very passionate about the importance of conservation for our life in the future and our survival, but we all do it from very many different perspectives. So Parks for All is intended to be sort of that Canadian response to Nature for All. But it's more than that. And we're going to get, oh, sorry, I got to make sure I know how to do that. It's intended to be a plan and a response from the parks community, and I say that in quotes, parks community. When the group got together in 2016 to really think about who is it, who are all the people that represent the interests of, the land and water right across Canada, who are the advocates for that kind of work, it is extremely broad. It's, it's government, it's our Indigenous governments and leaders, it's the FPT world, obviously, federal, provincial, territorial, but there are so many others, including academics, the NGOs, professionals in the private sector, that need to come together to agree on sort of the direction. So Parks for All is an action plan that's intended to inspire and unite the community of people that care about these issues under 4 strategic directions. And these were defined through a collaborative process with the entire community. And they're centered on collaborate, connect, conserve, and lead.
So as we indicated, Parks for All came about as a result of a partnership between the Canadian Parks Council and the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. But as Dawn alluded to, there were many, many other partners and supporters and participants in this project, members of the arts community, members of our healthcare community, our academic community and Indigenous communities and others who have supported the project along the way. In particular, though, my role as a member of the CPRA, as a representative of a local government, was to bring that voice of local government practitioners who deliver those very pragmatic park spaces, those riparian areas, those playgrounds where children play and recreate every day. All of us as citizens who live in urban communities recreate and play in and utilize and gain that appreciation of nature through. And so we brought that voice to the table. But as mentioned, we brought many, many others together as a partnership in this initiative. So Parks for All came about as a result of a 2016 summit that occurred in Canmore, Alberta. And in that summit, we invited many, many sectors, as I described earlier, to that discussion. And in concert with that summit, a national advisory committee was established involving the Canadian Parks Council and the CPRA, the Canadian Parks and Rec Association. We also garnered representation from a wide number of sectors across the country. We developed a workbook. That was our first step in 2016, and that was the first draft that was actually discussed in 2016 at our summit. And that became the platform for what has become now Parks for All as our final output here in 2018. The workshop itself, or the workbook itself, was workshopped throughout that summit process. Beyond that summit, we extended into a fairly wide-ranging engagement process involving the CPC, the CPRA, and then ultimately thousands of participants who provided input into various iterations and stages of the drafts of Parks for All. As I mentioned, over 1,000 participants, over 100 organizations were involved in that process, and ultimately, as Dawn indicated, we're very proud to be standing here in front of you with this final version, this final output, which we finally delivered on not less than a few weeks ago. So, Dawn.
So I know Karen did an amazing job at explaining, what Nature for All is, and I alluded to the connection that we've been trying to make with this initiative to Nature for All. But I think, in that Nature for All meeting yesterday that I attended, the power of the community, the coalition of partners in Canada, who have all, for the most part, and this is an open invitation because this is just a growing body of work to contribute to the strategic directions and actions that are within Parks for All. I mean, it's powerful. We reach, hundreds of thousands of Canadians. And so if there's a way that all of us can sort of act together on some of the key things that we're suggesting and which have been agreed to by consensus across the community that are identified in this document, I think we can make some pretty significant inroads. So just to say, there's a very strong connection here and support for Nature for All Global. So vision of this document, it may look kind of long, and I can, speaking of the iterations of this document, it's been a difficult body of work to move forward because of the huge number of perspectives that we all bring to this issue. But this vision here really does represent the collective, interests of all those that have been involved in this process. A connected Canadian parklands and waters that support healthy nature and healthy people in harmony for generations to come, backed by an active, diverse parks community that cultivates shared goals, mutual respect, and collective action. And I would hope that everyone in this room can see themselves within that vision, because that is definitely the intent. This is a slide that I certainly understand the importance and the involvement that we've had of Indigenous communities within Parks for All since the very beginning. Eli, I see that you walked in. It's great to see you. And I'm going to save this a little bit for your discussion because I think you're going to touch on some of the themes and concepts that are important that we've been able to honor and include within this document. The important part is here that throughout Parks for All, the Indigenous voice and all of us within this community, it's interwoven throughout the document. It is about us holistically, and it really is a coming together of different ways of knowing. And so that has been part of the development in this document. The map here is intended to show that Indigenous worldviews have always, followed the natural contours of the land, and that is how the traditional territories have been defined. That's as far as I think I'm going to go with explaining this slide, because I hope anyways through the discussions maybe that Eli will have, and certainly can answer questions about that. Chloe Dragon-Smith, I need to give her an incredible shout out. She works with the Canadian Parks Council, but she was tasked to write the final version of Parks for All. And for those that were involved in this process, it was really clear in the draft 2 is that we needed to have somebody write the final version that has the insight, knowledge, understanding of the issues, and who can bring the community get together in a way which honors all of the inspirations, or honors all of the different intents that we wanted to see within here.
So as Dawn introduced at the outset of our presentation, there were 4 key strategic directions that were identified and agreed upon at our 2016 Park Summit in Canmore. So I'm going to quickly run through the 4 of them, but I guess I'll highlight for you that there are many priorities that are included, as well as very specific actions that were identified through this collective body of work and effort by this large group of constituents and participants in the project. And in no particular order, but we identified collaborate, connect, conserve, and lead as being our priority strategic directions. And particularly under the collaborate position, as shared by Dawn, my colleague in this project, the Indigenous voice was something that we clearly heard right from the get-go in 2016 and prior. And so that strategic direction particularly recognizes a strong priority interest in making that connection and working with Indigenous communities and governments across our nation. There are a number of connections and specific priority actions that were identified within that piece as well too. And because I had mentioned earlier that we had invited a number of sectors outside of our park sector, if you will, the academic community, our healthcare community, our arts community were invited, and many others. This notion of collaborating is key, I think, to the success as we look forward in our vision and developing the work of Parks for All. This notion of connection was identified as well too as a key direction for the project. The combination of connect and conserve, we felt, were key and important to the movement of Parks for All as we advance all the priorities of the project. Raising public awareness, from my perspective as a representative of local government, was an element that our sector and our constituency within the local government community has been working on for many, many years. We developed a national framework for recreation that included some statements that included this notion of connecting Canadians to nature, connecting to nature and fulfilling some of the IUCN and CPC objectives of communicating to our constituents. We wanted to share stories and successes that inspire Canadians through this piece of the strategic plan and the strategic direction of our organization. The notion of conserve, obviously of great importance, and this particular theme resonated through the Parks Summit and through the Parks Conference that occurred in 2017. It continues to resonate throughout the work that we all do. And undoubtedly, by bringing together the partnership of all of the various players that we've brought together under the tent of Parks for All, we think that the movement around conservation and conserving within our nation and beyond will be renowned, I guess, internationally, in our opinion. Leading was our final strategic priority. That notion of leading for generations to come, not only amongst the various sectors that we invited to the discussion and that we continue to invite to the discussion. We felt that both internally here within Canada as well as internationally, Parks for All could demonstrate that there's opportunities for us to bring together jurisdictional interests in a discussion around leading the parks interests that we demonstrate throughout the Parks for All document. So under those 4 banners of strategic directions, a series of priorities as well as very specific actions were identified through this process. And we have a challenge that we encourage anyone who's a reader of the Parks for All document to take on, and that includes fulfilling and applying some of these priorities and some of these actions within your particular area and sphere of influence. So Dawn, I'll leave that to you.
So all of you are probably saying, like, where is this document? How can I get a hold of it? Like, so I need to emphasize that this is so hot off the press that it's not even at the press yet. So much of our work has been like in the process of getting this piece done. So quite literally, the board of directors for the CPRA approved the final version after many iterations of feedback. We brought this to Canada's deputy ministers responsible for parks, protected areas, conservation, wildlife, and biodiversity last week. That makeup of deputy ministers represents about 22 departments across Canada in every single jurisdiction. I can say with great happiness that during that call, Parks for All was approved officially by those governments as a document that will now, it is policy essentially. I know that our Canada's federal, provincial, territorial park agencies will be looking at this document now to guide how they think about their own strategic plans and directions. And it's going to be something that we need to figure out how to move forward and report on, which is going to become very much the priority of work for this as we move forward. So this in front of you is a poster that's going to be also available. Next week we'll be putting together some print contracts. I'm also currently working with the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association's head office to establish a web page for Parks for All where everyone will be able to download it for free, and it's going to be an engagement tool for people to sort of register, indicate who they are, who they represent, what actions within the plan they think they can work towards and fulfill, and it will create sort of that distribution sort of listserv for us to follow up with people so we can start understanding what all of us are doing in Canada to move these actions forward. I think also these gatherings that we have, CCIUCN, I think is a huge partner in all of this and the members that we have. I think moving forward too, Murray and I have been sort of moving this forward without having a super long-term plan ahead of us, just because it's been quite a beautiful organic partnership that we've had. But 2019 is a year that we've got some commitments to having a pan-Canadian conference that will focus on the themes within this document. And we look forward to sharing more with this whole community about that, because it would be wonderful to have your input as to what that would look like. The other thing I just want to mention too, as an opportunity for the CCIUCN, is the next step for this document from a political standpoint is it will be presented to ministers for endorsement in March, when that meeting is officially scheduled. And there may be an opportunity here for the CCIUCN to demonstrate support for this work. I think having that kind of engagement from this community will be important for ensuring that everybody across Canada from the FPT political ministers world will be quite significant. So I look forward to having more.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation. But I saw in one slide the strategic orientation about enhanced park system. So I thought park system was based on representativity from ecological framework, and I thought the park system are nearly fully represented Canadian ecological framework. So did you change the, the base to create new park, or what it mean enhance park system? You want to create new park, or more representative, or sub level of ecological framework?
Well, I would say that level of discussion is probably a step below where this document has its intent. So no, we are not messing with any kind of scientific decisions about what is to be representative. A lot of that work is taking place currently within the Pathway to Canada Target 1 process. This document here is very much intended higher level up, but it is bringing together a broader understanding of who is the parks community. So I know when you say the parks system, I think the parks system, that wording is doesn't necessarily apply to what the intent of this document is all about. If that helps understand. Under the conserve piece, there is specific reference to very key actions that get at that level of specificity that you're talking about, but it's not prescriptive. This document is not prescriptive. It's very much an inspirational, this is where we should be going. So it actually has almost, it definitely is it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's professing to have higher standards. It's challenging us in Canada to do a better job at conservation from a broad perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.